So welcome from me. I'm Kusalasara, and yes, we've got following this series, we're doing a series of evenings on Milarepa, this famous Tibetan. On the back of this book it says, what did it say? Tibetan 11th century Buddhist poet, hermit, saint. So I'm going to be exploring a little incident. It's not really a story, a sort of incident and a set of teachings that he gave in one of the songs of Milarepa. And then after that, this evening, I'm going to, actually it's not me, we are going to be having a short ritual, a full moon puja, which Akasha Mitra is going to be leading. So talk and then ritual, if you want to stay for that, it won't last. It starts at about 9:45, and it won't last very long. So it's a nice way. Apparently, this full moon's going to be is a super moon tonight, and it's quite soon. So yeah, do stay for that if you can. Okay. Yes. So. Who's been to the other? We've had 2 other talks on Milarepa. Okay, some of you, not that many of you. Okay, great. Who's heard of Milarepa? Okay, a few more of you. Okay, so Buddhist. What did I say? Poet, hermit, saint, Tibetan, and he lived in around the 11th century in the Himalaya region, and he's very, very well known in Tibet. We've got an image of him sitting on the shrine, and he had an extraordinary life. So we might touch into some of his biography. It's a most amazing sort of out there biography. Involving murder, black magic, etc. All the good juicy things for a story, and reading Milarepa, his how he taught was in a series of songs. So he would have these spontaneous exclamations and teachings. So he didn't start off in very auspicious spiritual circumstances, but he became one of the great teachers of the Tibetan tradition, and he would spend a lot of time in the mountains, in very remote places, in very treacherous terrain, and those people who had contact with him would often receive a teaching in the form of a song. So what you'll see in that image is he's depicted like this. And apparently that's like listening to the inner teaching, something like that, which then comes out in song. And so Buddhist teachings often come because they're from sort of different eras in history, not just different times but different continents. They often come with their whole world. So when we listen to stories of the Buddha, it's good to listen not just to the teaching but the context of the teaching and sort of understand how people related. And for me, I really like hearing about the land in which those stories took place. So different Buddhist traditions sort of have their own landscapes, and they become quite important. How Buddhist practitioners interacted with the people around them, what kind of place it was. And when we enter Milarepa's world, we really are entering a kind of particular landscape. I've never been to the Himalayas, I've never been to Tibet, but from reading Milarepa, those mountains loom very large in my imagination, and there's lots of evocative names like the Silver Spring. What else have we got in here? Something about the Song of the Snow Ranges, the Red Rock Jewel Valley. I think you've had that one already. Snow ranges and peaks and caves, and some meadows as well feature a lot in the stories of Milarepa. So so we sort of can evoke this the remoteness of the landscape, and get a sense of not only the world that Milarepa lived in, but it sort of helps me anyway to sort of feel into his spiritual world as well. So I'm going to read a little bit. So I've got 2 books here actually. One's a commentary. It's called The Yogi's Joy, and we've been following this in this series on Dharma Night by Sangharakshita. And then this is volume 1 of the 100,000 songs of Milarepa. So 100,000 just means lots. It's not like specifically there are 100,000 songs. It's just, I don't know, it's probably about 50 or something. I haven't counted them. So and this chapter is called The Song of a Yogi's Joy. So that this book is named after this particular chapter. So I'll read a bit of it to you. The word yoga in this context doesn't mean the stretching, it means like a practitioner. The master of yoga, the Jetsun Milarepa, in obeisance to his guru's orders, went from Junpan to Yolmo snow range, where he dwelt at the tiger cave of Sengaeson in the woods of Singalin. The local goddess of Yolmo appeared in a gracious form, obeying the Jetsun's orders and rendering her best service to him. Milarepa remained there for some time in a deeply inspired mood. One day, 5 young disciples came from Mon to visit him. They addressed him thus: "It is said that this place is full of terror and an ideal place in which to attain great improvement in meditation. Can this be true? Have you found it so?" And then Milarepa sings in praise of the place. So we've got two things happening there. First of all, he followed his guru's orders, which is typical of Milarepa. Every song that he starts, he sings in praising to his guru, and there's a whole story around his guru, which hopefully someone will relate over the next few weeks. But very, very devout sense of faith towards his teacher Marpa. And if in that tradition, in those days, if you had a guru, you would do what they say. So if Marpa said, go to Yolmo snow range, that's what Milarepa would do without questioning it. And so he's dwelling at the tiger cave on his own, meditating. And in the tiger cave, or in that area, the local goddess appeared in a gracious form. And I like this, rendering her best service to him. So we can picture, or maybe it's worth talking about what the local goddess would be. So she's a spirit of the place in a way. So you can take it as a sort of personification of that environment. And you can be literal as well. You can, if you want to, just be really literal and say there was a goddess of that place that helped Milarepa, rendering her best service to him. And it sort of invokes a kind of supportive mood, a supportive situation for him to be practicing, for his spiritual aspirations to flourish within that environment, the tiger's cave. So a sense of harmony in a way with his environment, supported by the place he's in, which is different. So one of the previous weeks we looked at a story where he's entering into a cave and he encounters demons, and there's a whole episode where he has to work out how to respond appropriately to the demons. He goes through different ways. So the demons they're not friendly demons. They're aggressive. Actually, they're sort of taking the mickey out of him, start sort of mimicking him and things. Anyway, so it's quite different, those hostile forces compared to the goddess of this area. And we can also think of it as being expressive of his state of mind, expressive of Milarepa's state of mind. It doesn't have any obstacles to it. It's in line with nature. There's something harmonious around his mental states, his desire to practice, and the environment. There's nothing, no friction there. And it reminds me of images from the life of the Buddha as well, particularly, there are quite a few nature images where spirits of place in the same way support the Buddha in his practice. In particular, I'm thinking of soon after he's become enlightened, he's supported by the King Muchalinda, who's a giant serpent who lives in a particular tree. And when it rains, he puts his cobra's hood. You sometimes see statues of the Buddha under a snake's hood. So he's protected. The cobra's hood is keeping the Buddha dry. And then after the rain stopped, this cobra turns into a beautiful 16-year-old prince who bows to the Buddha. And also, of course, around the enlightenment story, the earth goddess comes to testify to his skillful action. And this isn't just mere kind of cultural flourish of the times in a way. This is important to us in depicting, understanding what's going on with these inspired states of mind. It's significant. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking a bit more about it. Partly what it shows us is that, well, in Buddhism, we're trying to raise our consciousness. That's one way of talking about it. So to raise our minds out of the mire of selfishness, I suppose. But we're not doing that by cutting ourselves off from nature. So these beautiful nature images show us that it's natural. What's being described, what's being exhorted by practicing is a natural extension of the whole world in a way. Enlightenment is natural. It's not inevitable. It's inevitable given certain conditions, but it's not. It's natural, and it's not separate from nature. But it's not. It's more than a nature religion. So the practice of Buddhism is not just sort of, go and like feel one with the ocean and that's it. You're enlightened. It's obviously it's much more than that. But it, So we have nature not as in this story. We have nature not as an object of worship. So the Milarepa isn't worshipping at a nature shrine. It's actually the other way around, that the nature goddess is supporting his Buddhist practice. And again, in the Buddha's life story and in Milarepa's story, you get these spirits of place who want to practice the Dharma. They want to become enlightened. It reminds me of having been on various solitary retreats. I don't relish solitude to quite the extent that Milarepa does. He's really kind of like a patron saint of solitary meditation. But particularly, I went to one solitary retreat in retreat centre in Scotland, and they've got a sort of like a ravine with a stream. But when rocks are really steep, it makes quite a loud crashing noise. And I remember arriving at it. I mean, it couldn't be more lovely, Dharma Kosha, but to me, it felt a little bit hostile. So this slightly treacherous ravine with this crashing water, always noisy, and I guess this sense of unknown, what was in the mountains behind me, and I could sort of see my mind softening to the place as I stayed there. As I became more familiar, but I felt also by practicing meditation, creating more positive atmosphere around myself, I was much more able to engage positively around the environment as well. And that would go up and down as well. And I sort of, over the years, I've just sort of noticed how I can see on solitary retreat that the environment reflecting my mental states as well. And there's often sort of it all becomes very dramatic as well when you're on your own and you haven't been doing very much. So a small incident with a cow in a field becomes like, this is a legend, the time when I sort of yeah. And this cow was really looking at me like really honestly I could see what it really threatening, and it's just really interesting sort of where you see threat and where you see sort of harmony and benignness. Yeah. Of course, it's not, in like novels, etc., plays, having the weather reflect one's mental states is quite common as well in the Western world. So there's that. So what was, apart from Marpa, who was Milarepa's teacher, what was he, apart from Marpa telling Milarepa to go to this snow range, why was he there? Milarepa was a renunciate, so he had nothing. He relished in having nothing. So he's a practitioner that's not associated with, say, a monastery or sort of particular roles or positions. Unaffiliated and had no particular responsibility. So he, and this is part of the Tibetan tradition as well, that you have these people who just go off and practice, and they often, as you can imagine, if you sort of spend that much time on your own, they develop these they're often quite eccentric. Milarepa certainly was very, very eccentric, and so he was very adept. He learnt to be a sorcerer when he was young, which is a whole story, but that wasn't the way of the Dharma, that wasn't his Buddhist path. But he had to learn spiritual skills to help him survive in the terrain. So he sometimes just had a bit of cloth wrapped around him. Sometimes he was completely naked, but he would have been adept at the kind of meditation and breathing that helps you generate heat, because obviously in Tibet it's very, very cold. It's cold outside when the sun's not shining. It's cold in the cave. Often he wouldn't have had enough tinder to make a fire. Often he wouldn't have eaten very much, or he sort of valued his meditation practice over any kind of comfort. So it would be preferable to him to stay in his cave and meditate and be hungry than to go and find food, go to the village nearby, get food. So the kind of asceticism that he practiced was not in any way self-destructive. So even though he would have been very, very skinny and wouldn't have eaten or looked after himself in the way that well-being was not his thing. So he, it was because he had this extraordinarily positive meditation practice that nourished him. It wasn't just an idea about subduing the flesh or something. It was real in his experience. So, and so he had these extraordinary powers. Some of them practical heat generating exercises. There's a tradition in Tibet as well where Lama Govinda talks about this, where you somehow build up this amazing running power. So people sort of start running and they travel huge distances in short amounts of time. Milarepa goes in some circumstances. He might go into a bit of shape-shifting, a bit of flying. But in this story, he's not doing any of his magical tricks. He's just living the happy life of a renunciate. So, maybe I'll say a bit more about the next part. So, some people novices come to visit him, and they're the ones who say, well, we've heard about the reputation of this place, that it's full of terror, and an ideal place in which to attain great improvement in meditation. And so they're asking him about the place. Is it supportive for his practice? And one minute, it says page 82. Okay, go to page 82. Yeah, so he describes the place. He sings about it. He sang a song of praise, starting with obeisance to you, my guru, etc. This is a delightful place, a place of hills and forests. In the mountain meadows, flowers bloom. In the woods, dance the swaying trees. And later, he talks about his own meditation practice, or I should say sings about his own meditation practice. And in a way, this gives us also a flavour of this kind of, what is the nature of a yogi, of a practitioner of this kind, and the relationship to nature. So he goes through, I won't read all the verses, but he describes different animals and what their nature is. So for example, on the branches of the oak trees, agile monkeys swing and leap. They're not afraid of falling. Such is the wild monkey's way. Under the leafy canopy in the dense wood, the striped tiger roams and swiftly runs. Not because of fear or worry, this shows her haughty pride, and this is the mighty tiger's way. And then he talks about himself, he sings about himself. In the wood on Singha mountain, I, Milarepa, meditate on voidness, not because I fear to lose my understanding. Constant meditation is the yogi's way. So yeah, he's saying there that this is my natural way to be. This is in my real nature to practice in this way. And in fact, the novices have asked him, would they, seeing as you're so advanced, you obviously don't need to practice anymore, and would you come to the village and preach the Dharma, etc.? But he's saying no. It's of benefit for me to practice in this way. I can give teachings, but I want to just carry on practicing. This is my nature. One of the things that he talks about, he sings about, I keep saying talk when he doesn't talk really, apparently he had a very, very beautiful voice. So what he's meditating on, it says here, and from day until night the rainbows come and go. In summer and winter falls the sweet rain, and mist and fog roll up in spring and fall. At such a pleasant place in solitude, I, Milarepa, happily abide, meditating on the void illuminating mind. Yeah, meditating on the void illuminating mind. So this is the heart of his practice. This is how he can sustain himself, how he can stay so happy in his tiger's cave, in this remote valley, is the insights really that he's had into the nature of reality, into the nature of mind. So he's a Mahamudra practitioner, which means a great seal or great gesture, which we don't really need to go into that, but maybe I'll just talk about. Well, my talk today is called, I've forgotten what it's called, I didn't think of the title, something about freedom. Emptiness as utter freedom. Does that ring a bell? Does anyone care? When we're talking about the void illuminating mind, this is the word emptiness, void, shunyata. So what's happened here is Milarepa's mind is dwelling in a mode of perception that's quite outside of our ordinary day-to-day way of seeing things, outside of ordinary perception. So I just thought I'd try and sort of get to a little bit about that, and then we can see how he's expressing it, and then that will probably take us to the end of the evening. So what is the what do I mean when I say it's outside of our ordinary perception? Well, we've got a common sense way of seeing things, and all of you have tried meditation, so you'll see how even just a little bit of attention on your experience can change the way you relate to your experience. And one way of thinking about this is that our sense experience is where we get all of our information from. So that's how. In fact, someone asked me once when I was first coming to Buddhism, do we find anything? Is there anything that we experience that's outside of our senses? So with the senses are the five senses, and then the mind. So in Buddhism we talk about the six senses. So taste, touch. I can never remember the five senses. Taste, touch, smell, sight, sound. There we go. Plus the mind. So the mind is what organises our other sense input, and it's not like that they're not separate. So we couldn't have a mind without any of the sense input, and if we didn't have a mind to organise our sense of touch, then what would a sense of touch actually be? There would be no. The touch would happen, but the sense wouldn't. Does that make sense? Yeah. And how our mind organises it in an ordinary mode of perception is that there's me, and then there's everything else. Yeah. So there's a sense of me. I am myself. I touch things. I taste things. I hear things. And those things are external to me, and they impact me, and I impact that. But we are separate. So that's this kind of perceptual situation. But if we had different apparatus for sensing things, then we'd see or experience. It might not even be that we see. If we were dolphins, we'd have the sonar kind of equipment that they're endowed with. So I'd be sitting here clicking away, trying to see who's falling asleep, etc. And so I'd have a different sense apparatus, and so obviously that would mean that I sort of experience things differently, and I different animals can see things differently to us. So if I was a fly, they'd have hundreds of tiny little eyes, don't they, in the big eye, so I'd see all around, and also my concerns would be different. So there's how we perceive, what we're concerned with, and how we understand all of that is related to just what we've been given. But actually we don't actually know from that what's going on. So for instance, I can't tell if you all are radiating heat, because I haven't got the ways of measuring that. Do you know what I mean? So if I had infrared, what is it that sees heat? Infrared, something like that. I'd be like, you would all look like these ready brek kind of glow things. So where does that take us? Different concerns, different information, and that would serve different purposes, but it would also always serve our sense of self, and I say that in a neutral way. That's not positive or negative. So then what we think is, given our set of apparatus, we think that the world is what we take it on face value. Basically, we don't investigate it. We just think, well, that's it. there's an out there, there's a me in here, so I'm just going to make the best of that and just make things go my way as best as I can. We all do that. That's like not an unreasonable way of going about things. And we can do that in really gross, aggressive ways, or we can do it in pleasant ways, kind ways, and just realizing that actually being kind is beneficial for everybody concerned. But what Buddhist practice is saying is that actually, why not dwell more in this sense of I'm not sure actually what's going on. Why not dwell more in that instead of trying to fix and understand the world around us? It's beneficial to investigate those assumptions that we have, to loosen them. So what meditation practice were you doing in the first half? I was in the beginner's course. Were you doing? Mindfulness of breathing. So then you start to examine the breath, and you start to see that it reveals whole kind of realms of sensation, experience that you might not have thought available in the breath. And then maybe you start to feel like, well, actually, where is the breath? It doesn't have an edge. And if I'm breathing in and the breath is nourishing me, where is my edge even? So that we can start to investigate this solidity that we are so sort of definite about. And there's different, that's not actually as solid as we thought. So the breath is one of these kind of gateways, isn't it, to the me. We know enough about what happens with oxygen to just think, well, that's where a bit of my edge interacts with the world, and it's not really an actual edge, and that can not just be an idea but an experience, and we sort of start to connect with the breath is a connecting force in a way, something like that. So where does that take us? Well, if we start to investigate that and soften that sense of definite me out in here and you out there, all sorts of things happen. We start to have for example, a better relationship with other people, because we haven't got such definite ideas about why they're like that and why I'm like this and what we need from each other. And one joyous example I was thinking about recently is a bit following on from what Milarepa was saying about when he was talking about his friend changing and getting ordained. So a couple of friends of mine are coming back from their 3-month ordination retreat tomorrow, and I just sort of keep wondering to myself, like, who have they become? So they've gone away with one name, they're coming back with another name, and that's just the surface in a way. The fact that they've gone away for 3 months and they've been practicing very, very intensively, and the fact that I haven't seen them, it's given me the opportunity to kind of refresh my idea of what they might be. And of course, that's the same for anybody all the time. But I suppose it's sort of emphasising this opportunity, and I'm thinking, I'm just sort of prepared to be completely open to this person and not think, or these people, one of them who I live with, and just rather than sort of tying together this character that I think they have, I'm just much more like, what are they going to come back as? And of course, a lot of it will be recognisable, and I'll know their habits, and I also can anticipate their needs when they get back as well. So it's not like complete transformation from, I don't know, anyway, can't think, my imagination's run out of something like that. But it's very nice having this sense about these people, and then it's like, well, why don't I have that about other people more often, and that can inform how we view people. So we think we know what's going on, sort of metaphysically. We think we know what's going on with other people, and we think we know what's going on with ourselves. I mean, I have enough self-knowledge to know that I don't really know what's going on with myself most of the time. But anyway, that's a secret that I should have kept to myself. Yeah. But this sort of common sense misunderstanding affects us very, very deeply, and it's not just a question of recalibrating and thinking, oh, actually, yeah, the world is a bit weird. I don't know what's going on. It's not. It's much deeper than that. The sense of a me that needs things to be a certain way is profoundly deep. It's not the deepest thing. Actually, what's deeper, and this is what Milarepa will have discovered is what's deeper than that is our own potential for enlightenment, is our own potential to be free of this self-concern, which is tied up with this fixed way of seeing things. Yeah, does that make sense? Maybe I'll pause there and just see if there are any questions or clarifications. Some thoughts happening in the room. Yeah.
This is maybe quite a personal question, so you don't feel you have to answer it. Just curious if you've experienced sort of that feeling of, I don't know, of not, because you're describing sort of like not having or stepping outside of yourself in some way, I guess, or not really having a self in the same sense, or getting past this sort of deep feeling. And I find that quite hard to imagine in a lot of ways. Yeah. So I just wondered if that's
I mean, I'm not. Maybe I won't talk about the personal, but I think there's degrees of it. So that, like, one thing that's really helpful is to think of when one's more contracted and more brittle to the world around us. I often think of me as a teenager. That's like sort of very, very concerned with asserting who I was, and very, very sensitive to any threat of that. And that there are moods that we're in when that's truer, and then there are moods when we're just a bit more at ease, able to relate. So the emotional response to this is a relatability, connectiveness to other people. There are these kind of more exalted states that we can access in deep meditation, and that realized practitioners like Milarepa have. But there are also experiences that all of us will have had. Moments of self-forgetting, maybe when working really well in a team, or having a really good communication where it doesn't really matter whose idea it was. When there's no sort of concern about anyone's ego winning the day or something. So we can look. It's a good question. So we can look for those times when that sense of self is less concerned with asserting itself, and just enjoy it as well, because that's a way of cultivating. It's like reminding yourself that that's nice, especially when one's feeling more contracted, and if you're offended, then that's a sign that there's a sense of me in here that's been slighted by the world out there. And yeah, is that helpful? I didn't answer your question.
Yeah, no,
slid aside from that. Yeah. Yeah. So getting into the habit of just looking in that way can also sort of encourage those kinds of experiences. Yeah. Yeah, maybe I'll any other questions now, just now? Yeah, JC.
you talked about there is no sense of self, in a way that the self is ever changing and ever sort of evolving. So if we acknowledge that and see it as a practice, how does that translate to relating with others? How does that relate to others? How does that impact others? I mean, it impacts the self because you acknowledge that you get away from your rigid sort of framework, but how does that affect your interactions with others?
Well, when I think of the Buddha and the different stories I have read and heard, I think that brings it, that he relates to each person or each group of people as individuals, and he responds to them really differently. So he's not got he makes formulas so that he can teach, but he's not got a formulaic way of responding to people. And that's what the sort of whole of his teaching is, in a way. It's like, when he spoke to this woman who'd lost her baby, he responded. He was totally aware of her grief and pain, and he responded to that in a very, very kind and subtle way. When he met this person, he pointed out, I don't know, he would teach a certain practice, or when he met what's that young player? Anyway, yeah, different people. Sometimes he would teach them particular practices. Sometimes he would relate to them much more personally. So I think that, and I also have this sense of people who I look up to, whose practice I feel is very strong. They're also very, very present when they're in your company. So that there's that sense of someone being very, very present, seeing more in you than you can see in yourself. So Milarepa would see any one of us, if you struggled up to his cave and asked for a teaching, what he would see, he'd see all the ways that you struggle to be open and expansive, but he'd see also the deepest potential. He would know that was possible. So he'd be relating to you on that basis. Yeah. And of course, what that is love. So there's nothing getting in the way of love in that situation, and how wonderful for that to be available for everyone. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
It's something. Yeah. I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to bring in a bit more Milarepa. So in his song, the Song of a Yogi's Joy, he talks about things that make him happy. So he's talking about the environment, but he also talks about, one of the lines is, the greater the distress and passions, the more one can be blithe and gay. Yeah, the greater the distress and passions, the more one can be blithe and gay. And the more ups and downs, the more joy I feel. So that's a bit perverse, isn't it? He's talking about how difficulties seem to exacerbate his enjoyment. So that's what I'm going to finish by talking about. It's that seems like every setback that maybe let's see if anyone's got any ideas of why he would be so happy with ups and downs. Why would that cheer you up? Yeah.
Maybe because he doesn't really see anything as failure, just life lessons. So it's like he's either successful or learn something.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's good. That's a good start. Any other thoughts? Yeah, over there.
I suppose that difficult times, when looking back on them, are a sign that you're able to overcome.
Yeah. So that's So that's I think that's sort of around the same area. Yeah. And it's interesting because I can definitely see that, and probably all of us can think about the difficulties that we've faced well have really helped us grow, and it's usually those that have made a significant contribution to who we are. You know, I was reading an article about someone who's lost his legs, and what's they called, IUD? What's that what they're called? Anyway, and he's saying that that's the best thing that happened to him because it made his life more interesting. And of course, we wouldn't wish that upon anyone either. So I can definitely, with hindsight, say that the things that I didn't want to happen to me have been good, but during them, when they're happening, I'm not so happy about a bad day, you know. Like, how's your day? It was awful. It was the best, worst day I've had. I'm not quite there yet. But what Sangharakshita says in this book is that every setback is a reminder of the impermanent, unpredictable nature of samsara and the sheer pointlessness of trying to hold on to things and experiences as though they were anything other than the product of our mind. Yeah. Every setback is a reminder of the impermanent, unpredictable nature of samsara and the sheer pointlessness of trying to hold on to things and experiences as though they were anything other than the product of our mind. So, I mean, it's really strong, isn't it? Like the sheer pointlessness of trying to hold on to things and experiences. And he's also pointing out that all of these manifestations, these ups and downs are manifestations of mind. So this is what we were talking about before. It's the mind that's organising our input. It's the mind that's creating the world that we experience. And anything that happens that we can take as a teaching that this is the case, that can thoroughly sort of deepen that understanding in a practitioner's life is a cause for joy, because as that understanding deepens, freedom arises simultaneously. So we can't help but, if we really understand things, we can't help but respond to them. Yeah, if that understanding is more than intellectual, more than mere like thought experiment, if it's charging down to the bottom of our emotional holding on as well, then we can't help but experience freedom. And if we do start to experience our ups and downs with such wisdom, if we can sort of start to relish them, then we will become more and more like Milarepa, whose only expression is joy. So he can only respond with joy. So, you know, in our house at the moment, I've had to get this in. I've been at Bor all for 3 weeks. We've got the builders in. That's all I ever talk about. And, you know, when the hot water's off again for over the weekend because they forgot to turn it on, etc. When we can't cross from one side of the house to the other, we're like, hello, speaking to each other across the pulled up floor, etc. You know, that can just be a source of freedom, exhilaration, and like, oh golly, I don't have to rely on the external world to support me. I don't need things to go my way. I don't need reality to manifest in particular ways for me to feel absolute confidence, joy, creativity, etc. So this is what Milarepa expresses. He expresses in this particular environment, in this particular way, that the freedom of a mind that's seen through the delusions of our common sense perception, and our sort of deep-rooted selfishness, which is there, but it's not really. There's much more to us than that, and that's what, if we met Milarepa as well, that's also what we would be seeing. Yeah. So I think I'll end there, and we'll be hearing more about the Yogi Milarepa and his crazy ways next week. So thanks for joining, and so do stay around for the full moon puja as well. Thank you.
So, we'll just take a 10-minute break, and then the full moon puja will be in here in 10 minutes or so. So you can stay here if you want to, or take a short loo break or whatever. We'll start in 10 minutes. Thank you. I couldn't see it on the tape.
Tickling. Tickling. No, I was exactly the same last time I came. It's funny as well because there was not, which is only one I was in. And I was like, why am I here? That's the clean throat. Only one. So I was just like, here's the track. Sometimes it's a sign of something, I think. What exactly? Talked otherwise. We wouldn't have talked otherwise.
No, it's in the who's there either. Because you're sort of yeah.
maybe just before we start, it'd be good if we can get rid of mats and cushions that we're not using, and then come sort of towards the front as well, those of you that are left. Great, so yeah, welcome back everyone. My name is Akasha Mitra and I'm going to lead this ritual for the rest of the evening. So I think it'd be good actually just to salute the shrine, just to start off the ritual. So we did that much earlier this evening, but we're kind of a new arrangement and a new group of people, so let's salute the shrine. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Buddhaya. Namo Dhammaya. Namo Dhammaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Sanghaya. Namo Namah. Namo Namah. Om. Om. So I'm just going to speak for a few minutes by way of introducing the puja, and then we will do the puja. So yeah, what we're doing there, I mean, we call it saluting the shrine, but we're actually not saluting the shrine. We're actually saluting the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. We're saluting the three jewels. So the Buddha and him representing enlightenment. So representing the highest possible potential for a human being, the Dharma, his teaching, which is the way to that teaching, and the Sangha, the community of practitioners, and especially those who have actually become enlightened like the Buddha. And that's what we're doing in the puja as well. So it's 3 verses, and we're saluting the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So these are the most precious things in the world for a Buddhist. Actually, I'll just say they're the most precious things in the world, because I'm a Buddhist, so I will say that they are the most precious things in the world. You know, it's incredible, isn't it, that we, I think less and less, sort of paradoxically as time goes on, I think I take those things for granted less and less. You know, like even, I was thinking this the other day, I was walking down the street and I was having some negative thoughts about something. And there was almost like this thing that just swooped in. It was like a beautiful kind of bird of prey sort of swooping in and just picking up this negative thought and making off with it. And I was thinking, like, I don't have to do that. I don't need to go down that track. I don't need to get embroiled in negative thoughts. I don't need to dwell on that. Actually, I can just let that go. Like, just that is wonderful, isn't it? To be able to choose our thoughts, to be able to choose whether to be kind to someone, to choose, over time what that leads to actually is choosing the direction of our lives in this beautiful kind of upward spiral Well, towards what this represents, towards enlightenment, which is way, way further than I can imagine. But we can have these kind of glimpses which allow us just to sort of reach towards that in our imagination and think, what would that be like to be completely creative in our thoughts all the time, to have that unlimited possibility for compassion, for beauty, to completely relate to another human being. What would that be like? And this is what we are. This is what we're sort of praising in the puja. Really, this is what we're giving homage to. And we're doing this on the full moon because the full moon is very auspicious, isn't it? I mean, I imagine this is sort of cross-cultural and kind of, that since the beginning of time, the full moon has represented something. It's what it represents is kind of illumination, doesn't it? It's like in the full moon, the moon is at its fullest. This beautiful thing which fascinates us from when we're children. We look up and there's this incredible thing in the sky and it's at its fullest, and it represents illumination. It represents it makes me think of the figure of Varochana, who's an archetypal Buddha. They call him the illuminator, and under moonlight you see things that you're not able to see when the world is in darkness. And that's one way of sort of thinking about enlightenment, isn't it? It's like we're here, we have this potential all the time, but as our minds open more and more, we can see things as they actually are. And it's said that the Buddha was born on the full moon, that he gained enlightenment on the full moon, and he died on the full moon. So you can take that literally or you can take it metaphorically, but the full moon represents something, not just for for Buddhists, but for human beings. And traditionally, the Buddhist Sangha would gather on full moon nights. So before we had, I was going to say filofaxes then, like what era am I from? Before we had filofaxes, before we had smartphones and diaries and things like that. So showing my age. Before we had all of those things, people would go by the moon and we'd say, they knew to gather on the full moon basically, and they would come together and they would spend the whole evening practicing and meditating together. So we're not going to do that, but we are coming together on the full moon, which is very lovely and very auspicious. So in the puja, it's a threefold puja, so there are 3 verses, and we'll just sit quietly for a few minutes, and then we'll have the first verse. And then after the first verse, Pranyamanis is going to lead us in the Shakyamuni mantra, so the mantra to the Buddha, bringing something of enlightenment into the room in the form of mantra, in the form of beautiful sound. And during the Shakyamuni mantra, we can make offerings if we want to. And then we'll have a second and third verse, and then we'll sit quietly for some time at the end, and then that will be the end of the ritual. Okay, so let's get into our posture. Just to check, is this for anyone's first time at a puja or a Buddhist ritual? Okay, so it is for a couple of years. So I'll just say a little bit about how it works. I won't say too much about the actual content of the puja, but it's in call and response, which means that I say a line and then you say a line. If you want to, and obviously, I'll say a line and then you say a line, basically. So to begin with, let's just sit quietly for a couple of minutes, just letting our minds quieten down and just arriving in this space. Just sitting here quietly, being aware of each other, aware of where we're sitting, aware of our bodies. Perhaps just starting by being aware of our sitting on the cushion or the chair, noticing our breathing. just spending a little bit of time sitting quietly before we start the ritual. Threefold puja. Opening reverence. We reverence the Buddha.
We reverence the Buddha,
The perfectly enlightened one.
the perfectly enlightened one,
The shower of the way.
the shower of the way.
We reverence the Dharma.
We reverence the Dharma,
The teaching of the Buddha,
the teaching of the Buddha,
which leads from darkness to light.
which leads from darkness to light.
We reverence the Sangha,
We reverence the Sangha,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples,
that inspires and guides.
that inspires and guides. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Muni Swaha. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Muni Swaha.
Reverence to the three jewels. We reverence the Buddha.
We reverence the Buddha
and aspire to follow him.
and aspire to follow him.
The Buddha was born as we are born.
The Buddha was born as we are born.
What the Buddha overcame,
What the Buddha overcame,
we too can overcome.
we too can overcome.
What the Buddha attained,
What the Buddha attained,
we too can attain.
we too can attain.
We reverence the Dharma
We reverence the Dharma
and aspire to follow it
and aspire to follow it
with body, speech and mind
with body, speech and mind
until the end.
until the end.
The truth in all its aspects,
The truth in all its
the
aspects,
path in all its stages,
the path in all its stages.
we aspire to study
We aspire to study,
practice,
practice,
realize.
realize.
We reverence the Sangha
We reverence the Sangha
and aspire to follow it.
and aspire to follow it.
The fellowship of those who tread the way.
The fellowship of those who tread the way.
As one by one we make our own commitment.
As one by one we make our own commitment.
An ever-widening circle.
An ever-widening circle.
The Sangha grows.
The Sangha grows.
Offerings to the Buddha. Reverencing the Buddha.
Reverencing the Buddha.
We offer flowers.
We offer flowers.
Flowers that today are fresh and sweetly blooming.
Flowers that today are fresh and sweetly blooming.
Flowers that tomorrow are faded and fallen.
Flowers that tomorrow are faded and fallen.
Our bodies too, like flowers, will pass away.
Our bodies too, like flowers, will pass away.
Reverencing the Buddha.
Reverencing the Buddha.
We offer candles.
We offer candles.
To him who is the light, we offer light.
To him who is the light, we offer light.
From his greater lamp, a lesser lamp we light within us.
From his greater lamp, a lesser lamp we light within us.
The lamp of Bodhi,
The lamp of Bodhi,
shining within our hearts.
shining within our hearts.
Reverencing the Buddha.
Reverencing the Buddha,
We offer incense.
we offer incense.
Incense whose fragrance pervades the air.
Incense whose fragrance pervades the air.
The fragrance of the perfect life.
The fragrance of the perfect life,
Sweeter than incense.
sweeter than incense,
Spreads in all directions.
spreads in all directions
Throughout the world.
throughout the world.
So that's the end of this evening. So wish you a safe journey home. See you next time. If you could put your mats and cushions to the side.